A storm sky bends low over the battlefield, its dark clouds swollen with the weight of anger, loss, and memory. The air is thick with the smell of wet earth, iron, and the acrid tang of smoke from torches snuffed out in haste. Mud grips boots, armor, and torn banners alike, pulling them into a slow, relentless embrace. Every step, every motion is a struggle, a reminder that the ground itself has become a part of this war, holding within it the sweat and blood of men who will never rise again. Among the shattered remnants of palisades and the bodies of fallen knights, Sir Alaric lies pressed against the earth. His gauntlet fingers dig into the cold, sticky soil, feeling its weight, its persistence, its quiet accusation. He listens. The distant toll of a bell echoes across the field, a solemn hymn that signals the retreat of enemies and the fragile, trembling survival of those still alive. Hooves strike the hard ground in measured rhythm, a heartbeat that rises and falls across the battlefield like a memory. Somewhere, a man curses, harsh, raw, torn from the throat by fatigue and despair. Somewhere else, a horse neighs, nostrils flaring, hooves skimming puddles of mud and blood. And beneath it all, the wind carries whispers of stories, fragments of life, whispers of prayers, laughter, and curses that mingle and rise into the storm-dark sky. Alaric closes his eyes, letting the sounds swirl around him, letting them tether him to life. Memories intrude in flashes, vivid and unwelcome, yet comforting in their familiarity. He sees his squire, the boy with hair like spun gold, laughing at a joke Alaric barely remembers. He sees candlelit chapels, where prayers were whispered softly, where vows were made not for glory, but for mercy, and a faint glimmer of hope in a world that seemed relentlessly cruel. The cold steel of duels flashes before his eyes, the sting of a cut he won, the bitterness of a cut he could not avoid. Each recollection presses against him like the mud itself, heavy, suffocating, yet grounding him in a way the chaos of battle never could. Alaric shifts beneath the shattered palisade. Pain claws at his shoulders, his knees, his ribs, but he moves with purpose, deliberate and careful. The battlefield is quieter now. The clamor of steel and screams has faded, leaving a hollow resonance that vibrates through the mud beneath him. His chest rises and falls, ragged and deliberate, each breath tasting of iron, leather, and the dampness of earth. He can smell the smoke of extinguished fires, the faint sweetness of crushed herbs trampled into the mud, the lingering perfume of fear left by men and horses alike. Every inhalation is a communion with the dead and the living, a reminder that life is fragile, and yet he remains. Above him, a banner flaps feebly in the wind. Torn and mud-streaked, it is a ragged echo of the house it represents, yet it still clings to life, fluttering stubbornly like a heartbeat. The emblem, though marred, is still visible, a defiant symbol of endurance and history. Alaric stares at it, and in that ragged fragment of cloth, he sees the past and the future intertwined. He remembers the faces of those who have fallen beneath his own hand and those of allies, and he feels the weight of their sacrifice pressing upon his chest. Every life taken, every scream lost to the mud and rain, is etched into the soil he now grips, an unspoken testament that survival is never solitary. It is stitched with the lives of many. The rising sun pushes through the storm clouds, washing the battlefield in pale gold and amber. Light strikes the broken shields, dented armor, and puddles of blood with an almost reverent tenderness. Alaric lifts himself onto a shattered lance, its wood splintered and jagged beneath his hands, mirroring the fractures in his own body. Every step is a labor, each motion a negotiation with pain. The sunlight is both cruel and merciful. It exposes the devastation, yet it promises that life continues, that the earth will accept him again, and that the horizon holds more than loss. Every step forward is a meditation. Alaric remembers the oaths sworn in candlelit chapels, the silent promises to family and house, the whispered words of devotion to honor and duty. Faces blur in the mud and blood. A friend who laughed too loudly in the night before dying silently. A rival who escaped fate by fleeing. A child who hid and watched, trembling, beneath shattered walls. The ground beneath him is a map of memory, each footprint a chapter in a story he cannot yet leave behind. He presses his hand into the mud, feeling the wet weight of history, of human striving and collapse, and he realizes that survival is not merely living. It is witnessing, remembering, and carrying forward the truths of what has been endured. The battlefield exhales a quiet sigh of aftermath. Silence stretches long, punctuated only by distant groans, the soft scuffle of wind, and the intermittent call of birds returning to a shattered land. Alaric's heart beats with the rhythm of resilience, each pulse a subtle defiance of death. He allows himself to feel the exhaustion, the fear, and the sharp, sweet ache of life. The sun strikes his armor, illuminating scratches, dents, and the wet mud clinging to every surface, a mosaic of struggle and survival. There is no joy here, only acknowledgement, the fragile, stubborn truth that he remains scarred but unbroken. He rises fully, surveying the scene before him. Mud, blood, splintered wood, and torn banners form a tapestry of conflict and endurance. In the distance, the banners of his house cling to their poles, weathered but unmistakable, as if to remind him that history is not erased by battle, only written anew. He traces the emblem with his gaze, imagining the hands that raised it, the voices that called its name, the hearts that clung to it in fear and hope alike. The weight of survival presses upon him, physical, spiritual, and moral. Yet in this burden, he finds meaning. Alaric moves forward, each step deliberate, each movement an assertion that he has a place in the world that has not yet been claimed by death. The mud slows him, the armor drags, yet he persists. Every fallen lance, every discarded helmet, every broken shield is a reminder that endurance is more than victory. It is resilience, courage, and witness. The sun rises higher, touching the torn banners with fleeting brilliance, painting the battlefield in gold and red. Alaric feels the connection to those who came before him and the responsibility to those who will come after. Each scar, each bruise, each tremor in his limbs is a testament to living history, a story to be carried forward in silence and breath. As he walks, he recalls the prayers whispered beneath candlelight, the vows taken in darkness and fear, the quiet courage of men who faced the impossible and bore it with dignity. Pain gnaws at him, but beneath it lies the satisfaction of endurance, the bittersweet truth that life, scarred, bloody, and weary, is still worth carrying. The battlefield, in its silence, becomes a canvas of survival. Each broken body, each mangled banner, each splintered weapon a stroke in the portrait of human perseverance. Alaric's passage through it is not only physical but symbolic. He carries memory, honor, and witness across the mud-stained ground. The wind catches the torn banners again, lifting them like sighs of past. Alaric continues, mindful of the living and the dead. He senses that survival is a covenant, binding him to a story larger than himself. Each careful step forward is an act of defiance, a statement that the heart can endure even when the body falters, that memory is as sacred as blood, and that the scars we bear are not marks of shame, but badges of witness and courage. He imagines the dawn stretching across fields yet unclaimed, hills yet unconquered, and he feels the weight of responsibility pressing upon him. To carry this day into the future, to honor the fallen with the breath of the living, to weave the threads of despair and hope into a tapestry of endurance. Alaric's figure moves steadily through the aftermath, a solitary sentinel in a land marked by fury and chaos. The battlefield seems almost reverent now, the light softening, the mud and blood catching gold in its folds. The wind whispers across the field, teasing the torn banners into dance, and in the fluttering cloth, Alaric finds a rhythm, a cadence that mirrors his own heartbeat. The scars, the wounds, the pain, all of it coalesces into a singular, undeniable truth. Survival is not passive. It is deliberate. It is sacred. It is the quiet heroism of a steadfast heart refusing to yield. As he disappears toward the low horizon, where the storm meets the sun, where smoke and light converge, the battlefield exhales. The banners sway. The wind carries the echoes of men and horses long gone. And the story continues, alive, unbroken, and waiting to be claimed by those with courage enough to rise, to witness, and to endure. The mist clung to the river like a shroud, curling and twisting in the chill of early morning, hiding the scars of the night beneath its silvery veil. Sir Aemon staggered along the bank, boots sinking into mud thick and unyielding, the iron of his armor rattling softly with each weary step. His cloak, shredded and blood-stained, whipped in the wind like the tattered banner of a fallen army. Every movement was a negotiation with the earth itself, an argument with gravity, a plea to the river not to swallow him whole. And yet he moved because movement was survival, and survival was the only story he could still tell. The river mirrored a world transformed. The ripples caught the rising sun, fractured into shards of gold and silver, reflecting a landscape alien in its calm. Hours ago, this water had been a battlefield, a mirror to chaos. Axes biting, shields splintering, hooves pounding, men screaming. Now it reflected only the quiet aftermath, broken only by the faint murmur of unseen currents. The smell in the air told another story. Acrid smoke from burned wood, the coppery tang of blood lingering stubbornly, mingling with the delicate scent of wildflowers that clung to the edges of a ruined bridge as if to defy the night's horror. Aemon's hand drifted to a frayed rope wrapped around the splintered mill wheel, half submerged, its fibers softened by the river's embrace. He felt the roughness, the history woven into the strands, the labors of hands long gone, the quiet persistence of human endeavor. It was fragile, yet enduring. He let the rope slip through his fingers, gazing at the broken bridge, its jagged planks jutting out like bones from the water. In that image, he saw not only the destruction, but the resilience inherent in all things. Even in ruin, life continued stubbornly, insistently. Memories surged, unbidden and vivid. The clash of steel on steel, echoing like thunder over a shattered plain. Screams that became a chorus of despair, a haunting hymn of the fallen. The boy with eyes too wide for the horrors he had seen, clutching a dagger with trembling hands. The commander, proud and unyielding, falling into the pit he had created for others. And the steed, faithful, loyal, and now lying broken beneath him. He had crawled, bloodied, bruised, through mud and shattered wood, tasting fear as bitter as the iron on his tongue. Every step forward had been an act of defiance against death itself. And yet there had been moments of strange beauty amid the carnage. A song had drifted on the wind from a village untouched by war, a melody of hearths and laughter, of life persisting despite the night's violence. Aemon had paused to listen, letting the sound mingle with the wind, a reminder that not all the world had succumbed to chaos. It was fragile, fleeting, yet somehow infinite, an echo of a life continuing elsewhere, a life he might never touch, yet could hear if he chose to. The riverbank shifted beneath him, slick and treacherous, but he pressed on, boots heavy, knees aching. His eyes followed the distant hills, shrouded still in mist, where forests whispered secrets in a language older than man. The sun began to pierce the gray, slicing through fog and ribbons of light that made his shadow long, skeletal, and unmoored. There was no triumph in surviving, no glory in the mud, only the unadorned truth that he had endured. Survival was a quiet, uncelebrated ritual, a witness to horrors no one else would ever understand. Faces haunted him. The boy who had wielded a dagger too large for his hands, the elder praying in the storm of blades, the commander whose pride had cost 1,000 lives. Death had been indiscriminate, yet here he walked, alive, a solitary observer of the cost. His hands trembled as he touched the hilt of his sword, not out of fear but from the weight of memory pressing against his chest. Every scar on his body, every dent in his armor, told a story that was both intimate and universal, a testament to endurance against impossible odds. The wind rose, shaking skeletal branches above, stirring leaves that fell in quiet spirals to the mud. The sound was almost human, whispering like voices of those who had perished. Eamon shivered despite the warming sun. He crouched, fingers skimming the river, noting the way the ripples distorted his reflection. Who was he now beneath the dented helm and torn cloak? Knight, survivor, witness? Perhaps all, perhaps none. The river did not answer, merely carried him forward, indifferent and eternal. He pressed on, boots squelching, armor clinking softly in the morning. Each step was a careful dance with the remnants of the night. Horse carcasses, splintered planks, abandoned weapons, and the broken dreams of men he would never know. And yet, amid the ruin, life pressed forward. Flowers bloomed defiantly. Water ran insistently. The wind carried songs from distant villages. Survival was not triumph. It was witness. It was an assertion that life, however battered, would continue. Hours passed, though time felt distorted. He rested at intervals, tracing scars on his body as one might read the map of a long, terrible journey. Memories clawed at him. The echo of a sword falling, the cry of a horse, the panic of a soldier trapped beneath fallen timber. He had lived through these horrors, yet there was a strange serenity in the aftermath. The chaos had passed, leaving only the quiet assertion of existence. The river, the mist, the stubborn wildflowers, they all bore witness as he continued. A crow cawed from the trees, startling him, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then he saw movement, a fish breaking the surface of the river, a rabbit fleeing the brush. Life, stubborn and eternal, persisted even here. Eamon understood that this was the rhythm of the world, the cruel and the tender, the horror and the hope intertwined in an endless dance. Survival was not merely living. It was bearing witness, remembering, honoring, and moving forward. By midday, the sun had risen fully, and the mist began to dissolve, leaving the river shimmering in pale gold. Eamon paused on a slight rise overlooking the water, noticing the way the sun caught the jagged remnants of the bridge. The battlefield was a memory now, softened at its edges, yet etched forever into his mind. The day was quiet except for the gentle murmur of the river and the distant hum of a village. He allowed himself a moment of reflection, tasting the air, noting the resilience in the world around him. Even broken bridges, even destroyed homes, even the scarred and weary human form pressed forward. The rope from a mill wheel had been a symbol of persistence. Now, the river itself seemed to offer the same lesson. Time would not halt, nor would the world wait for grief to pass. Eamon's fingers brushed the water, and he felt both the weight of memory and the pull of the present. He tasted the iron of blood in his mouth, smelled the sweet resilience of wildflowers, heard the wind carrying songs of life untouched by slaughter. These contrasts, the brutal and the tender, were the essence of survival. And yet, amid this reflection, he felt a stirring, a realization that the night's horrors were only a chapter. The river wound endlessly ahead, as if tracing a path through history itself, carrying him toward moments he could not yet foresee. The mist lifted fully, revealing a landscape scarred but alive. The hills ahead promised shelter, the song of villagers carried hope, and the river whispered continuity. Eamon understood that his journey was far from over, that endurance was not a gift but a responsibility, and that survival carried the quiet weight of stories untold. He lifted his head toward the distant tree-line, where sunlight struck the tips of branches, igniting them in gold. The bridge behind him was broken, the battlefield silent, yet the river flowed, the wind sang, and the world continued. He knew he would carry the night's terror forever, etched into muscle, memory, and soul. And yet he also knew that each step he took into the light was a testament, not to victory, but to resilience, to the quiet power of life insisting upon itself. And so, with armor battered, cloak torn, body bruised, and spirit raw, Sir Eamon moved forward. The river at his side whispered secrets of endurance. The mist lifted, revealing paths both perilous and promising. Every ripple, every rustle of leaves, every bird song was a reminder that survival is not witnessed by the world, but by the soul who bears it. And in this quiet affirmation, he carried the story onward, alone, yet part of something eternal, until the narrative continued, and the world, unrelenting, demanded both remembrance and resilience. The citadel walls trembled as though the earth itself had conspired against the fortress, shaking with the relentless pounding of siege engines. Each impact sent shards of stone quivering into the air, dust rising in choking plumes that clung to every inch of skin, every fold of armor. Among the defenders, Lady Seraphine crouched behind a battered battlement, her helm dented, her gauntlets scorched, yet her eyes remained unflinching, luminous with a strange, desperate clarity. The acrid smoke of burning thatch curled into the sky, black and twisted, weaving with the morning mist to create a world that seemed both familiar and alien. She could taste the bitter tang of ash on her tongue, feel it scratch her throat with every breath, and hear the groaning of beams bending under invisible weight. A loose brick beneath her fingers became her anchor, a tiny fragment of tactile reality amid chaos. She gripped it, not for its strength, but for its reminder that she was still tethered to the earth, still alive, still capable of resisting the relentless assault. Stones beneath her knees were slick with a mixture of blood and rain, smoothed by the desperate hands of those who had fought and fallen here before her. Somewhere in the distance, a scream tore through the smoke, a ragged, raw sound that clawed at her ears, embedding itself into the marrow of her bones. Her thoughts drifted like smoke curling around a torch. She remembered her father's voice, steady and unyielding, guiding her hand along the hilt of her first sword. Precision, Seraphine. Strength is nothing without certainty. Let your strike be the measure of your resolve. She could feel again the weight of that first blade, balanced in her palm, and the thrill of racing across dew-slick meadows in the early morning light, the soft grass brushing against her boots, unaware of the shadow that would one day fall across her world. Those memories, delicate as lace yet sharp as steel, anchored her amidst the storm of sound, fire, and death. The moans of the wounded wove with the metallic clang of falling stones and the bitter wind that carried ash and screams alike. Comrades who had laughed beside her, shared bread and whispered prayers, now lay sprawled across shattered stone, their lives extinguished in bursts of flame and splintered wood. One young soldier, barely more than a boy, had been struck down by a falling beam moments ago, his eyes wide in disbelief, reaching toward her as if seeking salvation. She swallowed hard, tasting grief and grit alike, forcing herself to rise. To halt was to surrender, not just the citadel, but the memory of all who had fought, the echoes of their courage, their vanished laughter, the prayers they had whispered into a world that now seemed deaf. The assault showed no mercy. A catapult fired its payload, a flaming projectile tracing a cruel, elegant arc before colliding with the wall. Fire blossomed like a malignant flower, consuming timber and straw, sending showers of embers and shards into the air. Seraphine's fingers twitched on her sword hilt. With a breath that trembled but did not falter, she rose, stepping over the broken bodies of those who had given everything to hold this line. Her armor scraped against stone, singing a sharp, mournful note as she moved, a rhythm that matched the pounding of her heart. Time slowed in the heat of survival. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum in the silence between attacks. She could hear it, the pulse of the citadel, the vibrations running through the stone walls, mingling with cries of the living and whispers of the dead. Each swing of her sword became both a dance and a prayer, precise yet desperate, a negotiation with fate itself. The enemy pressed forward, relentless, but so too did she, a lone figure bound by honor, memory, and an unwavering refusal to yield. She remembered her brother, lying pale and still in a quiet room, the scent of candle wax and pine mingling with the chill of stone beneath her knees. She remembered the prayer she had whispered over him, trembling with grief and hope. These were the moments that had shaped her, the memory of love and loss that honed her blade as sharply as it honed her will. Each recollection was a shield, each spark of memory a defiance against the shadow consuming the walls. The enemy's war cries tore through her reverie, sharp as axes biting into wood. She met them with a calm born of unshakable resolve. A soldier lunged from the smoke, axe raised high, and in a motion as natural as breathing, she deflected, pivoted, and struck. Steel met steel, sparks flying, the air alive with a metallic tang. Around her, the world blurred, a torrent of motion, fire, and sound. But beneath the chaos, an intimate rhythm persisted, guiding her movements, tethering her to life and purpose. Outside, the sky darkened with smoke from countless torches and conflagrations. Wind carried ash and fear in equal measure, swirling around torn banners and shattered parapets. Every ruined wall, every splintered beam was both a testament to the night's fury and a canvas upon which courage etched itself. Seraphine moved through it like a specter, a wraith of discipline and defiance, stepping over despair as one might step over a puddle, leaving its reflection behind but never letting it cling. The bell of the inner keep tolled, its deep, sonorous tone cutting through chaos like a heartbeat against a storm. She paused, gripping the stone ledge, knuckles white beneath the gauntlets, allowing herself a fleeting glance at the carnage below. Here lay death and desperation, ruin and smoke, yet also proof of endurance. She felt it in the vibration of the bell, in the grit beneath her nails, in the pulse that refused to still within her chest. A sudden gust carried the scent of fire and blood, and with it, a strange clarity. She thought of those who could not continue, the fallen, the broken, the ones whose courage had ended on this stone. Each step she took was a whisper of their memory, a vow that their sacrifice would not vanish. Each swing of her blade, each deflected strike, each movement across the crumbling battlement was both a continuation of life and an act of remembrance. The enemy pressed closer. The clash of steel rang in her ears like a funeral bell, punctuated by cries of fear, defiance, and fury. Her muscles screamed, her lungs burned, yet she moved with an instinct born of countless hours spent training, fighting, surviving. She ducked beneath a swinging mace, rolled over debris, and brought her sword up in a swift, lethal arc. There was no time for hesitation. There was only the rhythm of battle, the dance of survival, the unspoken covenant between life and the edge of a blade. In a rare moment of quiet, she felt the weight of her solitude. She was alone in her struggle, yet surrounded by echoes, memories of those she had loved, trained with, or lost. She heard again her father's voice, the soft words whispered over a dying brother, the thrill of galloping across dew-drenched meadows at dawn. These memories were her compass, guiding her through smoke and fire, reminding her that she fought not just for herself, but for the fragments of the world that remained worth preserving. A flaming projectile smashed through the outer wall, sending a cascade of sparks and embers across the battlement. Seraphine ducked instinctively, rolling to her feet as the fire roared past her. The heat singed her armor, left her skin blistered beneath, but she did not falter. Around her, soldiers fell, some screaming, some silent, their courage as fleeting as the smoke that now filled every corner of the citadel. She stepped over them, eyes forward, each movement deliberate, precise, yet desperate. The ground beneath her feet shifted as a section of wall crumbled under the enemy's weight. Dust and debris filled the air, obscuring vision, making each step a risk of life or death. She could feel the tremors through her boots, the vibrations through her spine, each one a reminder that the world was no longer a solid place, but a trembling threshold between survival and annihilation. She forced herself forward, trusting her instincts, her training, and the stubborn flame of will that refused to die. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity. The sky, once pale with dawn, was now a roiling mass of smoke and ash. Yet even amid this inferno, Seraphine noticed small signs of life. A bird flitting through the ruins, oblivious to the carnage, the faint glimmer of sunlight on a shard of steel, the stubborn curl of green shoots pushing through scorched earth. These tiny fragments of persistence reminded her that the world could endure, and so could she. Finally, she reached the inner courtyard, where the last offenders had made stand. Their exhaustion was written in every posture, every tremble, every gasp of breath. Yet even now they fought. She joined them, shoulder to shoulder, forming a wall of defiance against an enemy that could not comprehend the stubborn pulse of human spirit. Together, they became more than flesh and steel. They became a heartbeat, echoing through the shattered walls, a testament to endurance, honor, and the unyielding flame of courage. Seraphine lifted her sword to the sky, letting it catch the dying light of embers. Around her, the citadel groaned, but did not fall. The bells tolled once more, echoing the rhythm of her pulse, of her breath, of her determination. She inhaled the smoke, tasted the grit, and exhaled a vow. She would endure. She would rise. She would carry the memory of the fallen, the lessons of the past, and the courage of the present forward, etched into stone and soul alike. Even as darkness pressed upon the walls, even as despair whispered in the wind, she remained unbroken. Lady Seraphine was no longer merely a knight. She was the embodiment of endurance, the sentinel of hope, the living testament that honor could persist where all else had been consumed. And as the first faint light of dawn began to pierce the smoke-laden sky, she lifted her gaze to the horizon, ready to face whatever came next, carrying with her the defiance of the human spirit and the indelible echo of courage. Rain hammers the wooden bridge with relentless fury, each droplet like the beating of a funeral drum, echoing against the swollen river beneath. The water surges, gray and ravenous, its current devouring the scattered remnants of men who fought and fell before dawn. Sir Godric staggers across the slick planks, armor streaked with rain and dark with blood, each movement a laborious negotiation between survival and surrender. Every plank groans beneath him, an intimate chorus of history protesting the weight of the living and the dead. Mud clings to his boots, sucking at each step, reminding him that the earth itself demands tribute from those who tread upon it. He remembers the charge with brutal clarity. The enemy's flank collapsed with a shuddering inevitability, sending men tumbling like rag dolls into chaos. Screams pierced the air, high, raw, and unending. As if the battle itself were alive, a creature of bone and iron that demanded tribute from all. Shields splintered under the weight of blows, hooves thundered over churned earth, and the ragged cries of commanders tried desperately to bend carnage into order. Blood mixed with mud, a living, breathing testament to the cost of ambition and loyalty alike. A broken helmet drifts downstream, spinning slowly in the gray water like a solitary ghost. It is a mute witness to the chaos, a token of lives ended in a heartbeat. Godric's hand, slick with rain and blood, grips a bent dagger, the last relic of his squire's courage. It is crude, nicked, and dulled, yet in it rests the fragile essence of hope, a reminder that honor can endure even as flesh fails. He presses it against his chest, letting the cold steel remind him of loyalty, bravery, and the cost of survival. The wind cuts through his soaked cloak, tugging hair from beneath his helm and carrying the scents of wet stone, smoke, and iron. Each gust seems to whisper the names of the fallen, their stories woven into the very air he breathes. Godric's heartbeat drums with the rhythm of the storm, echoing in his skull as if the world itself keeps tally of every life expended. Each step is a litany, a whispered prayer to gods both merciful and indifferent. Through the gray haze, the ruined keep looms, a skeletal monument rising from the mist. Its jagged towers claw skyward like the spines of a fallen dragon. The walls are scorched and fractured, windows hollow and unfeeling. This place was once alive with the rhythms of human endeavor, now reduced to whispers and echoes, a testament to ruin, endurance, and the inexorable march of history. Godric's gaze lingers on the stone, tracing the lines of fire-scarred walls, imagining the screams that once rang behind them, the laughter and prayers that are now swallowed by shadow. Every muscle protests, trembling with exhaustion, yet he moves. The bridge beneath him is no longer merely timber and rope. It is a threshold, a liminal space where memory and survival intersect. Behind him, the battlefield stretches in chaotic tribute to death. Ahead, the keep rises, silent, jagged, and eternal. Godric feels the weight of every fallen comrade in his bones, their courage pressing upon him like stones. Every step is a promise, a witness bearing testimony to lives cut short and valor left unclaimed by history's indifferent hand. Rain stings his face, running in rivulets through the folds of his cloak, and the river's roar rises beneath him, a voice of timeless authority. Godric pauses, listening. The water churns around broken timbers and discarded arms, shaping a melody of ruin that only the survivor can hear. He feels the pulse of life within him, fragile yet persistent, a delicate flame flickering against the unrelenting storm. The bridge is no longer a physical crossing. It is a symbolic journey between death and witness, despair and hope, the known and the unknowable. Memories wash over him in torrents, each more vivid than the last. He recalls the wide-eyed terror of his squire before the final charge, the resolute expressions of men who had given all, and the twisted faces of foes caught unprepared by the sudden turn of fortune. Each memory is a weight, a stone pressing into the hollow of his chest, yet he carries them all. They are his inheritance, the measure of honor, and the proof of what it means to endure when all else has failed. The wind brings a distant cry, a raven, its call sharp against the gray expanse. Godric turns, as if expecting a sign, something to guide him through the mist. But there is only the horizon, muted and unbroken, a canvas of silver and slate, yet within it pulses the faint heartbeat of continuity and hope. Life, he realizes, is not merely the absence of death, but the persistence of memory, of feeling, of courage in the face of obliteration. He thinks of the road ahead, winding and uncertain, yet inevitable. Beyond the keep, beyond the river, there will be more battles, more acts of courage, more tests of loyalty and endurance. Yet in this moment, on the bridge, drenched, bloodied, and weary beyond measure, Godric feels the stark essence of being alive. Every sound, the splash of water, the creak of timber, the rumble of distant thunder, imprints itself upon him. He is no longer merely a man moving through space. He is a witness, a carrier of stories that might otherwise vanish. The rain softens, tapering from furious hammering to steady drizzle, and Godric steps carefully over the splintered planks. The river below churns with relentless indifference, taking and leaving without care, a mirror to the impartiality of history itself. Godric presses the dagger to his chest again, feeling the cold steel against warm skin, and whispers a silent promise to those who fell, that their courage will not vanish into the oblivion of memory, that their lives will echo through him, through the lands they defended, through the stories yet to be told. Lightning flashes far to the east, illuminating the ruined keep in jagged silver light. Its towers rise like bones in the sky, skeletal guardians of a past that refuses to die. Godric imagines the people who once dwelled there, the laughter and weeping, the plotting and prayer, the ordinary lives that ended in extraordinary violence. Every detail of their existence is now part of the ruin, part of the shadow that stretches across the river and the battlefield, part of the story he is bound to carry. He moves again, each step deliberate, a negotiation with exhaustion and despair. The planks quiver under his weight, a protest that vibrates up through his boots and into his soul. He imagines the squire he lost, his face pale and determined even in fear, and feels the dagger's warmth as if it channels courage across the gap of death. Godric's mind drifts to the moments he cannot forget, the flash of steel, the shouts, the fleeting camaraderie, the betrayal, the silence after the scream. All of it blends into a single, pulsating river of memory and survival. Rain slicks his cloak and washes into the rivulets of his hair, yet he presses onward. The center of the bridge feels like a crucible, a place where time slows, where the boundaries between life and death, past and present, blur. He sees the river not just as a force of nature, but as a mirror of history itself, unfeeling, relentless, yet somehow allowing passage for those who endure. He feels himself crossing into legend, not the tales sung in halls or written in scrolls, but the living, trembling memory carried in the hearts of those who survive to witness. One last glance behind him, at the river, the battlefield, the scattered lives clinging to memory like flotsam, and he steps forward. The ruined keep looms larger, its shadow stretching across the water. Each tower is a rib, each stone a relic, each crack a testament to endurance. Godric is more than a survivor. He is the bearer of history, the living memory of courage, the keeper of whispers that must not be lost. The bridge groans beneath his feet one final time, a hymn to endurance, and he crosses fully into the shadow of the keep, carrying the fragile flame of life, loyalty, and remembrance. Here, at the edge of ruin, the storm begins to relent, the rain softening to a gentle, persistent patter. Godric pauses, the dagger still pressed to his chest, listening to the rhythm of water, wind, and stone. The battlefield, the river, the planks, each bears witness to what has been, to the lives expended, to the courage tested. Ahead lies the keep, jagged, imposing, yet alive with untold stories. Godric's journey has not ended. It has transformed, becoming a pilgrimage through memory, survival, and the unyielding heartbeat of humanity. And in that crossing, in that suspended moment, he becomes something more than flesh and armor, more than blood and bone. He becomes a keeper of memory, a vessel for courage, a bearer of the silent, indomitable voice of those who have fallen. The bridge, the river, the storm, They're all now part of him, and he part of them. Life persists, memory endures, and in the trembling pulse of a man soaked and bloodied, history whispers its eternal refrain. A dawn tinted with blood and ash stretched across the battlefield, as if the sky itself had been wounded by the chaos of night. Smoke rose in slow, curling columns, turning gold where the sun caught it, darkening to purple and gray in the hollows. The scent of scorched earth and splintered wood clung to everything, merging with the metallic bite of blood, sharp and lingering. Each step across the littered ground would have left a mark, but the dead were many, and the earth itself seemed to remember them, refusing to let the living pass without acknowledgement. Amid the ruin, Sir Roland lay, his body sprawled beneath a broken canopy of blackened trees, armor rent and dented where blades had found purchase. Yet his chest rose and fell with a rhythm of life that seemed impossibly steady, a heartbeat echoing like a drum against the silence. His fingers traced the rough bark of a charred tree, feeling grooves and scars, some shallow, some deep, as though the forest itself bore witness to the horrors that had transpired. The canopy above, though shattered and smoking, filtered the first light of day into fractured beams, illuminating the small, precise details of devastation. The torn cloth of a banner snagged on thorns, a broken sword buried in mud, a helmet dented beyond recognition, the faint shimmer of dew on a torn surcoat. Roland's mind wandered to the moments before the clash had broken everything. Sunlight glinting off polished armor, the ceremonial parades of knights in splendid array, the noble horses prancing to the beat of drums. Then came the roar, sudden and consuming, of lances shattering against shields, of steel biting flesh, of screams that did not distinguish between highborn and common soldier. The silence now was almost unbearable. Only the whisper of wind through shattered branches and the distant cry of a crow penetrated the stillness. Each sound seemed amplified, each movement magnified. The rustle of leaves, the twitch of a fallen horse's tail, the low moan of men trapped beneath splintered wagons. Roland's senses were taut, alive in a way they had never been before. Every nerve screamed with awareness, each breath a fragile assertion that he still belonged to the world, even as it lay ravaged around him. The battlefield had become a place where memory and survival were inseparable, where the act of living itself carried the weight of countless dead, each life a thread in the tapestry of human struggle. He closed his eyes briefly and allowed himself to remember. The charge of horses, the thunder of hooves over trampled earth, the clash of lances that splintered shields and sent men flying, the smell of sweat and blood mingled with the perfume of crushed wildflowers that had grown on this very land. He remembered the scream of a squire, young and untested, whose hands had gripped a sword far too heavy, whose courage had been luminous yet insufficient against the chaos of combat. He remembered the crackle of fire as buildings burned at the edge of the field, the snapping of timber, the soft groan of structures collapsing under their own weight. Each recollection was vivid, piercing, almost unbearable, yet was the only thing that tethered him to his own survival. Roland's gaze fell upon a banner twisted in the thorn branch of a blackened tree. Its threads, once vibrant and proud, were now dulled and frayed, fluttering weakly in the wind, as if exhausted by the weight of memory itself. He reached toward it, brushing his fingers across the rough fabric, and for a moment felt a fleeting connection to the past, a glimpse of a world that had known ceremony, glory, and unbroken purpose before it had been shattered. There was grief in that moment, deep and aching, but also a fragile kind of gratitude. To survive was not simply to live. It was to bear witness, to hold the memory of all that had been lost, to endure when so many could not. The groan of a distant limb, the low whine of a horse trapped beneath debris, the muffled cough of a soldier still clinging to life. These sounds wove themselves into Roland's awareness, a symphony of survival and despair. Pain lanced through his body with every breath, every movement, but he welcomed it. Pain was proof of being alive, of holding space in a world that had sought to erase him. Every sense was heightened. He could feel the vibration of distant birds taking flight, the warmth of sunlight beginning to seep through ash and smoke, the subtle shift of air across his skin as the day slowly claimed the battlefield. To exist here, in this fragile interlude between death and life, was to understand that survival itself was both a defiance and a gift. Roland remembered the faces of the fallen. The men who had laughed with camaraderie only hours before, now frozen in mud, eyes glassy, hands rigid. He remembered the terror in the eyes of a young knight, the silent prayers of soldier clinging to life, the sudden, inexplicable courage of men who had faced annihilation and found a strength that even they did not know they possessed. Each image burned into his mind, and yet he knew that to carry them all would require endurance beyond the physical, a resilience of the spirit that weighed heavier than any armor. Survival demanded more than flesh. It demanded heart, memory, and witness. He shifted slightly, wincing, and noticed small details. The glimmer of dew on crushed grass, the soft rustle of leaves undisturbed by human feet, the distant murmur of a brook that had escaped the destruction. Life persisted, stubborn and quiet, indifferent to the chaos of men. And in this quiet persistence, Roland found a strange solace. The grove around him, though scarred and blackened, seemed to breathe alongside him, a living testament that even in destruction, continuity endured. Each tree, each branch, each fragile shoot breaking through ash was a reminder that time moves forward, that memory persists, and that courage, though battered, remains. Roland's thoughts drifted to honor, once a clear and rigid concept, now fragmented and intertwined with necessity, fear, and the raw assertion of survival. He considered courage not as a ceremonial act or a moment of valor celebrated in song, but as the quiet insistence of existence against impossible odds. To endure, to rise when all else has fallen, to witness the unspeakable and retain humanity. This was courage writ large, even if invisible to the outside world. His reflection deepened, touching the profound responsibility of carrying memory itself. Every heartbeat was an act of defiance, every breath a testament to lives lost and unremembered. The horizon was a painting of smoke and gold, a landscape where devastation and beauty intertwined in ways that no bard could capture. Roland saw beyond the grove, beyond the field of ruin, to the villages that had sent sons and brothers to this slaughter, to the families who would never know the truth of what had occurred, to the silent prayers offered in the dark hours of the night. He understood that survival was a covenant not with the living, but with the dead, a promise to carry their stories forward, to honor their courage in the quiet endurance of life itself. He rose slowly, painfully, every joint screaming, every muscle protesting, yet there was dignity in the motion. His wounds were stark reminders of what had been sacrificed, what had been endured. Yet he stood upright, the grove whispering around him, the faint glow of dawn catching on the twisted branches and charred bark. Each step he took was deliberate, measured, a physical act of remembrance. The smoke swirled at his feet, curling into patterns that might have been mistaken for spirits dancing, and he imagined them as the souls of those who had fallen, moving through the world he now inhabited. Roland's mind lingered on the notion of legacy, not one of monuments or songs, but of quiet acts, of bearing witness, of enduring. Life, he realized, was both fragile and relentless. Courage was the unbroken thread connecting all that had been to all that might yet be. Survival was not merely a refusal of death. It was an embrace of memory, a commitment to the truth of experience, a testament that the human spirit can endure even the most absolute devastation. He gazed at the horizon once more. Smoke and gold merged, a vision of endings and beginnings intertwined, a tableau of loss and persistence. The silence was reflective now, not oppressive, filled with echoes of bravery, fear, and human tenacity. Somewhere beyond the grove, life persisted. The delicate drip of water from leaves, the cautious stir of animals returning to their routines, the tentative rise of birds into the morning light. All of it spoke of continuity, of resilience, of the unspoken promise that life, no matter how battered, would continue. Roland breathed deeply, inhaling the acrid mix of soot and iron, feeling the pulse of life within him, a quiet but insistent rhythm that mirrored the heartbeat of the world itself. He stepped forward, each movement an affirmation of survival, each breath a defiance of oblivion. His eyes, wet with reflection yet unbowed, met the horizon one final time. Smoke and gold intertwined like memory and hope, loss and perseverance. And in that moment, he understood that survival was more than an act. It was a story, a witness, a proof that courage, even in silence, endures. The battlefield lay behind him, a scar on the earth and on the soul. But ahead, the day beckoned with fragile light and uncertain promise. Sir Roland walked on, carrying within him the weight of memory, the ache of loss, and the unyielding spark of life. And in each step, each breath, each heartbeat, the story of courage and survival whispered into the wind, a quiet testament to all that had been endured and all that might yet endure. Night falls with a chilling hush over the ruined abbey. The wind threads through shattered arches like a whisper of accusation, stirring the loose stones at Sir Leofric's feet. He limps among toppled pillars, each step stirring clouds of dust that cling to his battered armor. The acrid scent of candle wax, mingled with damp stone and the iron tang of blood, fills the air. Moonlight glints off his cracked visor, throwing jagged shadows that stretch like fingers across the rubble. Ghostly hands reaching for the living, or perhaps trying to pull him into the past. Every corner of this shattered sanctuary bears the echo of what has been lost. The metallic clang of armor, the terrified whinny of horses whose riders never returned, the distant, hollow cry of men swallowed by the night. His hands trail over the remnants of devotion. Broken pews, splintered and blackened, crumble beneath his touch. Manuscripts, their edges curled and water-stained, lie open to pages that will never be read again. They're the bones of faith, fragile yet persistent, reminders that what endures cannot be destroyed by fire and steel alone. Each touch is a communion with memory, with the lives extinguished in a single breath of violence. The air is heavy with sorrow, thick and tangible, as if the walls themselves had absorbed grief and now exhale in silence. He remembers this sudden collapse of the northern flank. The ground had erupted in fire, the screams of comrades blending with the roar of steel and the crackle of arrows. Faces are seared into memory, the wide-eyed horror of men he had sworn to protect, the helpless anguish of those torn apart in a heartbeat. His own horse had fallen beneath him, throwing him into the cold embrace of the abbey's flooded cloisters. Water rose to his waist, icy and unforgiving, pressing him against the stones, and for a moment the world seemed to tilt sideways, as if the very heavens had abandoned him. Pain became his companion, constant and intimate, each step a negotiation between flesh, memory, and survival. The abbey itself was a corpse of stone and shadow. Its roof lay in tatters, its sacred halls hollowed by fire and fury. Yet, amid the ruin, a pulse persisted, a fragile, stubborn insistence of life. A candle guttered in the breeze, casting a trembling glow across cracked tiles, and Leofric felt that flicker as a tether to the present. Survival was no longer a matter of strategy or skill alone. It had become a ritual, a sacred choreography in which every movement, every measured step across jagged stone was a vow to honor the fallen, to remember the past, to bear witness to what endures. He paused beneath an archway, listening to the wind weaving through the skeleton of the abbey. Each gust was a voice, each drip of water from fractured gutters a heartbeat. Somewhere in the shadows, the faint rustle of a small creature startled him, reminding him that life clings in corners the heart cannot imagine. His breath came shallow, deliberate, tasting of damp stone, smoke, and iron. Each exhalation carried memory, of faces frozen in terror, of prayers whispered in vain, of a world shattered by the clash of ambition and duty. Yet, in that air thick with death, there remained an ember of hope. The quiet insistence of life pressed against ruin, a pulse that refused to be extinguished. Memories of fire haunted him. He could still smell the northern flank consumed in flames, the acrid smoke clawing at his lungs, the way sparks had danced across the night sky like a constellation of despair. He recalled the fractured screams of men whose names he would never speak aloud, their futures erased in a heartbeat. Yet amidst the devastation, there were fragments of clarity, the faint sound of a hymn drifting through the open roof, a discarded manuscript bearing the trembling handwriting of a monk who had known nothing of war, whose words now survived as a testament to endurance. Even in ruin, there was beauty. Even in loss, there was meaning. He came upon a broken statue, once a saint, now a witness to devastation. Its face was worn by fire and time, yet its gaze seemed to follow him, patient and unyielding. Leofric reached out, fingertips brushing the cold stone, and in that touch felt the continuity of existence. Memories of vows taken in youth, oaths sworn on altar and battlefield alike, pressed upon him. The world might crumble, men might fall, but the spirit, the unquenchable insistence to live, to bear witness, to endure, remained. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time itself seemed suspended in the grip of grief. The wind rose, carrying the scent of rain and distant pine, mingling with smoke and iron. Shadows lengthened, merged, and divided, like living things shaped by memory and loss. Leofric's mind drifted to questions he dared not speak aloud. What is courage when survival is mere stubbornness? What is faith when the altars themselves lie in ruin? And yet, within these questions, he felt no despair, only recognition, a solemn acceptance that life, once imperiled, is a trembling, sacred gift. He moved deeper into the abbey. The flooded cloisters whispered beneath his feet, each step a delicate negotiation with cold water and jagged stone. A fallen beam loomed like a specter, yet he ducked beneath it, bending not just his body but his resolve. The moonlight reflected off shards of stained glass, scattering colors across the wet floor, painting the ruins with fleeting beauty. He lingered over these patterns, their ephemeral glow a reminder that light persists, even in the darkest night. His thoughts returned to comrades lost. Faces pressed into memory. The young squire who had laughed in the morning sun, now silent. The hardened veteran who had stood like a rock, now reduced to ashes and whispers. He imagined their voices, faint as the wind, calling him to remember, to carry forward the story they could no longer tell. Their courage and sacrifice were now interwoven with his own survival, a living thread linking past to present, death to persistence. Leofric's body protested every motion. His limbs were heavy with blood and fatigue, his armor a cage of rust and jagged edges. Yet the ritual continued. Survival demanded motion, demanded attention, demanded witness. He knelt beside a shattered pew, pressing a hand to the cold stone floor, and in that contact felt an echo of all who had knelt before him. Prayer was no longer words, but touch, memory, and intention. To live was to honor. To move was to remember. To witness was to bear the sacred burden of survival. The first signs of dawn painted the sky in muted strokes of rose and gray. Leofric's shadow stretched long across the cracked floor, fragile and persistent, a witness to a night that demanded everything. The ruins breathed around him, alive in their quiet persistence. Moss crawled through cracks in stone, water shimmered in broken basins, arches jagged yet resolute reached toward the tentative light. Survival was more than flesh. It was memory, honor, and the silent promise to endure. The human spirit, trembling and wounded, yet unbroken, persisted. Birdsong cut through the gloom as the abbey exhaled the last vestiges of night. Leofric lifted his gaze to the horizon. The road ahead remained uncertain, yet illuminated by the quiet resilience of dawn. Every scar, every shadow, every measured breath was testimony. The impossible had been defied, if only just. He thought of knights fallen, of comrades lost, their courage echoing in the ruins. He felt kinship with them, a bond forged in fire, blood, and unrelenting duty. Leofric rose, stepping into the pale light. Each motion was deliberate, sacred in its simplicity. Behind him lay the shattered abbey, heavy with sorrow, yet ahead stretched the faint promise of life renewed. He thought of the battles yet to come, of the trials that would demand more than courage, perhaps more than life itself. And yet he carried on, propelled by memory, honor, and the indelible human will to survive. Dawn grew stronger. The ruins, once menacing, now seemed to hum with a quiet energy, life persisting in cracks, in water, in shadows that clung to stone. Leofric felt the weight of history pressing upon him. Yet in that weight, he found clarity. Survival is not mere endurance. It is witness. It is memory. It is courage. It is the relentless, trembling insistence to move forward, to honor what was lost, and to carry the stories of those who cannot. As he stepped out of the abbey, the first rays of the sun caught the edge of his visor. Light glimmered like a promise across battered steel, across the scars of the night. Behind him, the ruins whispered stories of fire, betrayal, and courage. Ahead, the horizon waited, patient and inexorable. Every breath he drew, every step he took, became part of the ongoing story of knights, of men, of survival itself. And somewhere, in the far distance, the world stirred, awaiting the return of those brave enough to endure. The first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, cutting through the lingering mist of war. The battlefield lay in mournful stillness, a tapestry of shattered shields, splintered spears, and broken swords, each fragment whispering of lives spent and lives lost. Amidst this ruin knelt Sir Cedric, his armor dinted and scorched, gauntlets torn and bloodied, yet the rhythm of his breath remained steady, deliberate, almost meditative, as if the chaos around him had become a distant echo he could merely observe rather than feel. The acrid stench of burnt earth and iron clung to the air, invading his nostrils with every inhale, yet he did not flinch. The smell was a language of its own, one that spoke of fire, fury, and the unbearable cost of survival. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the memory of the previous day's madness wash over him. The enemy cavalry had descended like a tempest, hooves pounding like drums of doom against brittle ground. A shriek of steel against steel had pierced the air, mingling with the cries of men who had known brotherhood in battle and betrayal in the turn of a blade. He remembered the instant when the first wave had broken through, the sudden chaos scattering comrades like leaves in a storm. There was fear, yes, but also clarity, an almost sacred lucidity that emerges only when the heart teeters at the edge of mortality. Cedric's fingers grazed a splintered spear lying at his side. He traced the jagged wood, feeling the harsh truth pressed into it by violence and blood. Every crack, every gash, told a story of endurance, of men who had fallen so that others might rise. The wind whispered across the field, carrying the distant calls of crows scavenging among the corpses and the faint groan of wounded men hidden in shadow. Time itself seemed suspended here. Minutes stretched into eternity, each one saturated with the weight of memory. He could almost hear the ghosts of his fallen brothers, an echo of laughter, a shout of warning, a prayer half-formed and swallowed by the smoke. Nearby, a tattered pennant fluttered weakly in the breeze. Its colors, muted and dulled by fire and mud, were hardly distinguishable, yet its presence held a significance far beyond mere fabric. It was a symbol of continuity, of defiance, of a story that refused to end despite the carnage. Cedric knelt before it, bowing his head in silent acknowledgement. Even in defeat, even in exhaustion, the emblem was proof that life endured, that courage outlasted the blade. He felt a sudden surge of purpose, an understanding that survival was no longer mere chance, but a testament to will, to memory, to the sacred duty of the living to honor the dead. He rose slowly, the creak of joints and leather punctuating the quiet. Each movement was deliberate, a dance of endurance honed through pain and repetition. Shield in hand, he scanned the expanse before him. Shadows clung to the hollows of the earth, creeping between the bodies, weaving through the remnants of tents and banners, while the early light struck the jagged edges of weapons, illuminating the brutality in sharp relief. Every step he took was a negotiation with memory, a conversation between what had been lost and what must yet be carried forward. The silence around him was profound, but it was not emptiness. It was expectation, a space pregnant with the possibilities of rebirth, of rebuilding from ruin. He moved past the fallen, glancing at faces twisted in the final throes of life. Some were young, barely men, their eyes frozen in terror and disbelief. Others bore the marks of seasoned warriors, the lines of battles past etched deep into their features. Cedric felt their presence as tangibly as the sweat and blood coating his armor. He whispered names under his breath, a litany of remembrance that tethered him to what had been and what must endure. Survival was no longer a personal victory. It was a covenant, a sacred obligation to carry forward the stories of those who had given everything. The wind shifted, stirring the tattered pennant once more. Its movement drew Cedric's gaze upward, to the horizon where the first true light of dawn painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The battlefield stretched out like a canvas of contrasts, fire and shadow, life and death, hope and despair. The silence was punctuated only by the soft rustle of wind through scorched grass, a crow's solitary caw, the faint creak of abandoned armor settling into the earth. In that quiet, he felt the pulse of something eternal, the rhythm of the world persisting despite suffering, the promise of continuity even in the face of devastation. Cedric's mind wandered back to moments of camaraderie amidst the chaos, the hand clasped in reassurance, the nod of understanding shared in fleeting seconds, the unspoken bond of men who had faced mortality together. He recalled laughter that had sounded impossibly human amidst the screams, songs murmured around flickering campfires, prayers uttered to gods who may have listened or may have not. These fragments, small and delicate, became treasures to him, a reminder that even in war, humanity persisted. He remembered the look in Sir Alaric's eyes as they had stood shoulder to shoulder, holding the line while the enemy's shadow fell across the plain. Fear had danced there, but also defiance. "We hold," Alaric had whispered, a promise carried on trembling lips. That voice, faint now, reverberated inside Cedric's chest like the echo of a bell, tolling for the fallen, marking the rhythm of a heartbeat unwilling to cease. He felt the absence of that courage now, yet also its enduring presence, embedded in every scar, every dented plate of armor, every fallen brother whose body had become part of the earth itself. The field seemed to breathe beneath him, the dead and the living intertwined in an uneasy, fragile balance. Cedric knelt once more, this time not in exhaustion, but in reflection. His gauntlet brushed against the mud, gritty and cold, and he drew his hand back slowly, feeling the texture, the weight, the undeniable reality of survival pressed into every nerve. Each scar on his armor, each dent in his shield, became a chronicle of endurance, a record of a life unwilling to succumb to oblivion. The memory of fallen comrades lingered in every shadow, every glint of steel, every whisper of wind. Above, the sun rose higher, piercing through clouds tinged with smoke, casting long, trembling shadows across the torn earth. Cedric inhaled deeply, tasting the bitter tang of ash and soil, letting it mingle with a metallic reminder of blood still fresh on his gauntlets. The field was alive, yet not with laughter or song, but with memory itself, thick and palpable. A distant horse whinnied, a reminder that the world beyond this carnage continued, that life pressed forward even when the heart refused to follow willingly. Cedric thought of the villages he had passed on the way here, small clusters of smoke and chatter now silenced, abandoned to fear or worse. He thought of the families who would never see their sons, husbands, fathers returned. And he thought of himself, of the fragility of one life clinging stubbornly to this scarred earth, a witness to horror and heroism alike. Each breath he drew was a defiance, each heartbeat a drum echoing the memory of what had been endured. Rising fully, Cedric lifted his gaze to the horizon. Light spilled over the battlefield, transforming gore into glimmer, ruin into revelation. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, silent, expectant, waiting for the living to claim their inheritance from the dead. His heart, still steady, carried both the sorrow of loss and the fragile ember of hope. The field was not just a place of death. It was a testament to courage, to endurance, to the profound resilience of men who dared to defy mortality. He moved forward deliberately, each step measured, a ritual in motion. His shield, battered yet steadfast, reflected the soft brilliance of dawn, glinting like a promise. The tattered pennant flapped once more, stubborn against the wind, and Cedric recognized in its stubbornness the essence of his own survival. Not chance, not fate, but will, memory, and the unspoken oath to bear witness. The battlefield behind him remained a silent testament to what was lost, but before him lay the promise of motion, of action, of a journey forward. And so he walked, each footfall a beat in the long, unbroken rhythm of life pressing on. Each glance at the horizon a meditation on shadows and light, loss and endurance. Survival had ceased to be instinct alone. It had become memory, honor, sacred duty. The dead had given their stories, the earth had claimed their bodies, and the living, the solitary Cedric among them, now bore the weight of remembrance. In the quiet aftermath, in the fragile brilliance of a new day, he carried it all, a solitary figure against the vast canvas of a world that had not yet forgotten, a testament to courage that would outlast the final toll of the bell, the last whisper of the wind, the fading cry of the crow.